Hey guys, my name is Philip and this is going to be the part 3 to the Sawhorse video, build video. So part 2 where we left off, we basically had all the parts final milled. Everything now is down to final thickness, final width and final length. Be sure to check out part 1, part 2 and this video will make a lot more sense. So this video is going to be focused on laying out the mortises and cutting the mortises. So let's get into it. So I've got my parts. The mortising happens really in the feet and the legs. And I've also got my plans. So be sure to check out the website, philipmorleyfurniture.com, and you guys can get your own set of plans. So before I start any layout, I need to pick out the part and select my face that's going to go out, and also the what's going up as far as the part goes. This is pretty simple. It's a sawhorse. I'm not really too concerned about the grain direction. So everybody has their own way of marking out parts. This is just something that was trained to me back in college and trade school. Whatever works for you, just keep it simple and quick. You shouldn't have to pick up the part and think, well, what's what? You should be able to just identify it straight away and get going. All right, parts selected. Time to lay it out. So this is my top. I'm going to reference everything from the bottom. Just looking at the layout sheet here for the leg. Let's see, 1 3/4. On the bottom here, my tenon on the bottom that's going to go into the foot is 1 3/4. So I'm going to quickly lay that out. So that's going to be my shoulder cut. And then from that shoulder cut, I'm going to come up 10 7/16 to the bottom of the mortise. So 10 7/16. And then my actual mortise is 2 7/8. So you can see I'm moving my tape back and forth. Just saves me from having to do the math. But now that I have it on one, I'll go ahead and hook the bottom and I'll mark my tape. So 1 3/4, just like a storyboard. 12 1/8, and then 15. And that way, every part I select, instead of trying to bunch them up and mark them all at the same time, I just hook the bottom, put those little dashes. Okay, so I just want to mention real quick, as I'm laying this out, like I mentioned, use my tape as a storyboard, a nice sharp pencil, and as silly as this might sound, I've used a lot of pencils, and for layout, I like this, the H, so it's the hard number 3, and it just works really well because it gives a nice crisp line and stays really sharp. But doing the layout, make sure you're laying it out from the back side. So I've already got my face. I need to lay it out from the back side because when I do the through mortise with the router, it's really important that you're doing it from the back side. And then the last little pass you do before you go all the way through, you punch it and do one pass and go. And that way you get a really nice clean cut on the outside, which is important since we have this through tenon. So now that I have all these lines done, and it's really important that you have a really sharp pencil and you be very accurate with this. There's going to be no jig, there's going to be no stops. When we route this, we're just going to go straight to our lines. So the better you do here, the better the whole job's going to come out. Now I need to find the center. This is something I kind of stress upon to my students. People get pretty caught up on, like, okay, I got 3 3/4, and they're not quite sure what that should be, and they're trying to do the math. It just doesn't matter in this case. All I need to know is I have a 1/2 inch mortise and it needs to be in the center of this board. So here's a real quick way to find the center. I will say if you do this, do it somewhere where it's obviously not a mortise line, because I've had students do it close to their mortise and then they end up mortising to that line. So I'm going to go to the very top, line all the way across, and now use the 45 part of the square. And I'm going to move this back and forth until the blade intersects with that line perfectly. Flip it over, do the same on this side. All right, so where those two lines meet, that's the center. So now I can go ahead, slide this guy on over until it intersects. Double check. And so basically in between those two lines, which is about a 1/16, is dead center. So I'll just move this forward a little more. All right, that looks good. So now I'm going to come down to where the actual mortise happens. Pop that line and then step off, because I know the mortise is a 1/2 inch, so I'm using a 1/2 inch diameter bit. I'm just going to step off a 1/4 inch to each side of that line. And then reset this. Now if I looked at this before I moved it, I could have just counted it back on the scale, but that's okay. All right. All right, so now I have my mortise laid out. So it's just going to happen right there, dead center, and I only need to do this one time. I don't need to go through every board and do this same layout. The important thing is I have my limiting marks of the width of the mortise, and once I set up my router with the stop, then I'm just good to go. I'm always referencing off the edge. So let's go ahead, everything's laid out. Instead of doing the feet right now, I'm just going to go ahead and take care of these. So I'll get my router, I'll tell you what bit I like to use. All right, so I've got my router. It's important to do this operation, you have to have a plunge router. There's many good routers out on the market. This one's somewhat new to me and I really like it. But really, as long as it's a plunge router, you're fine. And by plunge router, what that means is you have to be able to plunge it like so. You can't use a fixed base router. So this is the type bit I like to use. It's a up spiral, 2 flute, and it's made by Undrud. Actually, this one's not. This is Whiteside. So Whiteside makes really nice bits, and also Undrud makes really nice bits. So 1/2 inch diameter does a really clean cut, especially when you're doing, let's say it's not going to be a through mortise. The up cut works really well because it basically takes the chips and throws them out towards the top instead of forcing like a down cut, forcing those bits down. A down cut, I usually use if there's any type of CNC operation where I'm not wanting to pull the piece off the table. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and get this chucked up. Alrighty. All right, so now the bit's done. I need to go ahead. I've got my fence, and I need to go ahead and set up here so I can actually mortise this. So what I'll probably do is I'm going to set it in my vise and set it on the outside here. Okay, so now I've got my my leg in the vise, and since this is going to be a through mortise, like I mentioned before, the back side is facing up, and I had to kind of arrange it like this because I don't want to end up going into my table itself. So real easy, half of it's in my vise and then the other is on what I call this an apprentice. I'm not sure the official name, but a little helper. It's made by Cobalt. Just works really simple and works well for this. So now I can come here and I can mortise down and go all the way through. So I've got my router with the bit, I got the fence put on, but now I need to find the center, or not the center, but find out where my bit's actually going. So I'm just going to rotate the bit until it's perpendicular, I guess, to the edge. And now I can go ahead and move this guy and locate it. So I'm going to bring the bit down to the surface, and that way I can line it up. And it's also got this pretty sweet micro adjustment. So like I said, now it's time to get this set just right because I'm not going to move it again. All the mortises will happen with this one setup. All right, so I've got that. Now I need to set the depth. So I'm going to spin this around maybe, see if it makes any sense. All right, some of you see that, but basically to set the depth, how I like to think about it is I need to find 0. So 0 is where that bit just hits the surface here. So I'm going to bring this on down and then lock it out. So that's 0. I have my tape. So the thickness of this is 7/8. So at 1 inch, it would go all the way through easily. So now I'm just going to loosen all of this. I'm going to push this down until it hits. So now I'm at 0. Now I'm going to move my little indicator up to 1 inch. It's probably not super accurate, but it really doesn't matter in this case. And for most mortises, even if it's not a through mortise, you always want to go a little deeper. Even if it's 32nd, even if it's 16th, it's not going to hurt anything. So I find instead of trying to flip this up and measure and go back and forth, just trust this, that it works. Every router has some type of setup like this, and it's just fast and get you there. All right. So I'll just raise that up to 1 inch. Now I'll lock this out. So my travel from here to here is 1 inch. So what I'm going to do is I set this to the second indicator down. I'm going to rotate this now to that indicator. And I'm just going to push this off to the side and check. All right, good. So it's not going all the way through. It stops shy of about 1/8 inch. So I'll peg this down, take care of the majority of it, and then I will switch back to that lower indicator, and then that'd be my last pass, go through and done, and then make a really clean cut instead of having a jagged cut on the outside face. Okay, so now I'm set, ready to go. I'm just gonna put my air protection in. For this, since I'm just doing this as a demo and a video, I'm not gonna put my mask on, but typically if I'm doing a lot of this, I'll wear a mask, but I always wear air protection too. All right, so now it's going to be hard to see how I do this, and I'll just try to explain it a little bit. It probably won't make a lot of sense. But I basically will start to the line closer to me, go in front of it by about 1/8 or 16th, and I'm pecking this. You'll see me going up and down. I'm not going to try to go all the way down and do one pass. It's just, you'll probably get out of control. And what I usually do is, if you think about steps, I usually step the mortise. So the first 3 pecks, I'm going forward, and I get deeper and deeper and deeper until I get all the way down. And how that helps, especially with deeper mortises, it helps those chips to evacuate out the top. If I just plunge all the way down at one time and those chips can't evacuate quick enough, it wants to move the router. It's also really important, I'll peck this whole thing down, and then I'll switch the setting to where it goes all the way through. I'll come straight down on that line, all the way through, and push away from me. If I do it the other way, to the back of the line and then pull it to me, this route just naturally wants to pull away. All right, so let's give it a go. So it's really important, and I kind of stress upon this, you want to feel natural with the router. Starting out woodworking, it's kind of hard. A router can be a scary machine. You need to respect it like any machine. But if you're forcing this thing and you're really pushing it in, you're going to end up moving something, and you're going to get a bad cut. So just be kind of natural with it. I went all the way through. Let's flip it over and have a look, but it looks like it did a nice cut. Let's mark this. So you can see it just did a really nice clean cut all the way through. This is my outside face. And you know, about an 1/8 inch back, it's just a really clean, smooth cut. And on this side, it's a little jagged from me going up and down. That's not going to affect the fit of the joint, but I don't want to see that on the outside edge here. All right, one down. All right, so now, you know, we've already done the mortising, so we did the through mortises on the legs. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna concentrate on the feet. This is the last set of mortises that we need to do. It pretty much is the same as this, but since it's gonna be standing upright, I'm gonna go ahead and show you real quick how I like to do it. So first things first, pick out the orientation of the board, and then, you know, lay out the mortises. So I haven't really talked much about this wood. The wood I'm using is poplar. You know, it's a pretty, to me, it's a pretty ugly wood. The color can vary pretty extreme. It's a great wood for paint grade stuff. And honestly, starting out woodworking, it's a great wood to start with because it's you know, user friendly, it mills nice, it mortises, you know, out nice, and it's somewhat sustainable. So instead of, you know, making Sawhorse out walnut, which don't make a whole lot of sense, this is utilitarian and it works great for it. All right, so now I've got the way this is actually going to be in the piece. I'm going to flip to the page. All right, so now first thing, I need to find the center, so 20 inches, 10. And what I like to do, just in case it may be a little over or under 20, kind of find a number it should be. Go ahead and mark it, flip my tape end to end, and then mark it again. That looks pretty good. But what that will do, say you do it and you come out with a little gap in between, then you just split that gap and it's real easy. Again, you don't have to know exactly what that measurement is. You just have to know it's in the center. All right, so let me just square that across. Let's get these out of the way for now. And then the plan says it's 2 7/8. So come off the center, 1 7/16, if I'm doing my math right. Two and 7/8, look at that. And again, I just need to lay this out. Well, these marks I need to lay out on all of them. All right. So what I'll do, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm going to pair them so my face is out this way and the face is out this way. And do the same with these. And then that way I can hook one end, and if it's off center a little bit, as far as the pair goes, it's the coplanar, and it shouldn't give me any trouble. So I've got 8 and 9/16 and 11 and 7-ish 16ths. All right, last one. I don't know what you're probably thinking. Why don't you just bundle these all up and square this all the way across? You know, you can do that. What I've found is, unless you're just dead perfect on the end, if these are skewed at all, where these are a little bit off, it doesn't work out. So for me, it's really important just to get really good at laying out marks. So now I can go ahead and square them all across. So this guy's done. Again, really important, get this line nice and crisp because that's what I'm mortising to. All right, so now we've got our marks for the width of the mortise, 2 7/8, and it just goes dead center into this. So again, we can do that little trick. I can use this line that I already have, reference right on the edge, and then get my bearing straight. All right, do the same here. So that's my center. And go ahead, come off of that 1/4 inch each way. And really, in this case, I could probably just freehand it. All right, looks good, 1/2 inch. So that's where the mortise is going. Okay, so I've got my mortises laid out for the width. I've got my one board with the center, and it's just always a good habit. If you're gonna have your face out and your fence is gonna reference up against the fence, then do that to every single one. That way, if I'm not dead center, it's consistent. A lot of things with woodworking, and you know, when I teach, you hear this a lot from me, is it's okay if it's not perfect, but as long as you're being consistent about it. You know, this is typically how I would do this, is I'll just put it in my vise and I'll have my router and balance it on this 1 inch. It takes a little bit of getting used to from not rocking back and forth. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna put 2 of these together and I'm gonna put the face out and the face out, set this in here, and I'm gonna try to set it as low as possible and line it up as far as the top goes, as perfect as I can get. I typically don't like doing this. It depends, like in this case, the Sawhorses, it'd be fine. But you know, what ends up happening, if this isn't just spot on, you could still rock and it may skew the router off a little bit. And also the vise kind of wants to do this to the pieces. So try to get it as low as you can in the vise. If you have some off drops of these, you could always put them down below and tighten it. That way these jaws will come parallel together and not be skewed. But this looks pretty good. It should work just fine. And this just makes it a little easier. We have more of a surface to ride on. So what I'm gonna do too, if you notice, I'm gonna set up the mortise to the far side. That way I have more room on this side of me. And then I'll run this one and then basically flip around and run the next one. All right, lock that down. And kind of, before you start mortising, get a feel for it, as far as the balance goes. Just kind of get used to it. So now I need to set the depth, which I have no idea what that is. Okay, so a little recap. I've got my parts for my feet all laid out. I've gone ahead and set up the router. It's the same bit, the 1/2 inch bit, made by Onsrud, upcut spiral. And I've gone ahead and doubled these up just to make it a little more secure to route this out. So yeah, got the depth set, I'm good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and just mortise these out. It's pretty much the same deal as I did before. I'm not doing a through mortise, so I don't need to do that last little step. I'm just gonna peck all the way, then come back to the front, peck all the way down, lock it out, and push away from me, up, and I'm done. You never want to go back and forth. It's a kind of a bad habit to get into. I see people do that all the time. Just one down, through, and out. Less chance of you rocking and messing up that mortise. And this is not a through mortise, so let's get it done. So that looks pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty deep mortise to do. And you probably noticed as I came up, I probably rucked a little bit. As you start coming down, it's where you really need to kind of get your center and go all the way down. So now, before I take this out, I'm just gonna flip this around and go ahead and take care of this one. Okay, so you know, just a recap, this has been video 3. Be sure to check out 1 and 2. But in this video, we covered the mortising. So we went ahead and we got our through mortises done on our legs, and then we got our mortises done on our feet. So also, if you're interested in this and you want the plans, go ahead, philipmorleyfurniture.com, and you know, they're downloadable, and you know, get yourself some plans to make this out. It has everything laid out in there for you. So the next video is going to be doing the tenons. So the way we're going to do that is it's called a bandsaw tenon with a shim. So let's get into it.